Welcome to our second day of what is, I think, a really wonderful weekend with all kinds of extraordinary new insights and things that we're all finding out about. And this session this morning is really very special because we're coming back to London. We're concentrating really on one theme, that of Lugh, the lost goddess of London. God of London, and the country in general. But I just want to remind you of where we've got to, in a way, a little recapitulation, particularly perhaps for those who haven't been before, to see what the energy and the kind of whole drive of these London conferences leading up to the Olympic year of 2012 really is. What we're doing here is we're recognizing that the calling of the world's family to the Olympic Park in 2012 is no coincidence. It is an extraordinary expression of our land and our national sovereignty, playing host to the global family in a key year when all around the world people will be recognizing the extraordinary energies out of the astronomical alignment which occurs in December 2012, where the sun is exactly at the point when it rises on the 21st of December at the same point as the galactic center. It's as if the sun has returned for the first time in 26,000 years at the midwinter solstice to the place of its origin. In many, many ancient traditions, the place of the sun's origin is the center of the galaxy, which of course it's not at physically, but there's that impression when you stand on planet Earth and watch the stars, and many, many cultures over the years have seen this. So this is a return of the sun to the place of origin. It is a rebirth of the sun, which only occurs at this point every 26,000 years, and many ancient cultures appreciated this and prophesied and anticipated this time as being incredibly special. As we were hearing from Nicholas Mann yesterday and Peter later in the afternoon, there's been this extraordinary kind of awareness of this very special time, and we're all extraordinarily privileged and gifted to be here now as part of it, playing a part. Don't think, though, a gong is going to go off in the heavens on the 21st of December 2012. We're in a process which even the astronomers recognize started in 1989 and goes on through to 2024 or so. 2012 has become the culturally choice date, the date that we've chosen through the Mayan long count. That's the point we've decided on, which is the kind of the midpoint of this huge period of 40 years of changes. And don't say, when are we going to go into them? I think it's pretty evident. Anybody in Ireland who's having trouble getting money out of the hole in the wall knows that we're right there. And, we are in the middle of profound changes. So 2 years ago, we started off with our first conference, and we point up the River Thames and the 2012 date. And then in 2009, we had a further conference examining the same qualities, all the time examining what is special about London, what is it about this incredible city, this sacred land. And we looked at many traditions. I won't go through them all, but if you didn't come to the other conferences, they're lost gems. But some of them we're going to put into a book, a small book, which we're putting together, which will encompass this whole energy and be available for sale before the Olympic visitors come. And now we're into this year, furthering the theme, and we have that wonderful discus thrower, and he's holding the initial logo, which I think is a wonderful kind of theme which we've been gifted with. But for me, I have to go back to the beginning, at least of my own kind of awareness of this, which is to just share quickly with you a little bit about landscape zodiacs, because landscape zodiacs play a key part in this whole Olympic geomantic treasure which we have in the country here. This is Catherine Emma Maltwood. She, here in beautiful pre-Raphaelite dress, is the lady who discovered or unfolded or fell upon or intuited the famous Glastonbury zodiac. I just have to point out that we wouldn't have any of this knowledge, at least through Catherine Maltwood's insights, without this. Because she married the man, John Maltwood, who invented the OXO cube. He invented the OXO cube around about 1911 and became the chairman of OXO, and they became millionaires, and through their money they were able to indulge us 100 years later with this wonderful insight. They could hire planes to take photographs of the landscape long before that sort of thing was done. Next year, and we'll probably have a special session in our London conference on it, is the centenary of the OXO cube. And you'll have all kinds of opportunities for buying 3 for the price of 1 in Asda and all that kind of thing. And every time you buy an OXO cube, just think Catherine Maltwood's husband, landscape zodiacs. They're absolutely, totally, inexorably connected. Just a way of remembering. You've seen this symbol several times this weekend, yes? The sign of the special crossover points between the ecliptic and the Milky Way, yes? These places. Nicholas was pointing them out yesterday. Well, secretly embedded in the OXO cube is that very symbol, so you never ever need forget it. Here is a landscape zodiac. This is the famous Glastonbury landscape zodiac. This is a marvellous map we've recently discovered in private hands in Glastonbury, 6 foot by 6 foot, painted by Catherine herself. And you can see the various symbols around there. And I think there's a red mark. Does this make, is this something that gives, sorry, top right? Oh, wonderful. So you can see all the animals of the zodiacal signs there. Thanks very much. And then later, Mary Cain produced what should be a perfectly round circle, but in fact is turning one of those ellipses that I was telling you about yesterday. But this is Mary Cain's model of the Glastonbury zodiac, and I just put that in here because Mary Cain has stood exactly where I'm standing now, talking to you on a number of occasions about this mystery. The late Mary Cain, greatly missed, but another great soul in this whole march of energy and insight and revelation about the British mysteries. And there are lots of zodiacs. This was a map produced in the late 80s of known landscape zodiacs in England. In about 1987, it was produced in a little journal, and they are, as you can see, they're just blistering the landscape. They're nearly all new things that have been found in the last 50 years, and all of them since Catherine Maltwood's discovery in about 1917 of the Glastonbury zodiac. So these are a modern expression of our landscape. And if you think, well, that's funny, are they ancient or not? That's a big question. But it's the same question you might ask of crop circles, which are another way that our landscape is blistering us with information. And so just think, you know, landscape zodiacs which take hundreds and hundreds of years to grow into being recognized now are rather like crop circles which just happen overnight and nonetheless fascinate us with all the information that they carry. And, you know, I think there's a very interesting kind of connection between the two of them. In the 1980s, a lady called Jill Smith, who some of you might know and who now lives up in the Hebrides, was inspired through meeting a gypsy in Glastonbury to set out on a journey which is known as the Gypsy Switch. It's called a Gypsy Switch because the whip that a gypsy uses to flick over the horse when he's driving along in his caravan is called a switch, so that sort of represents a journey. In the 1920s, an old this tradition of gypsies making a journey around the country to 12 separate places, staying at each one for just 1 month. Often there was a horse fair there. Each of these places that was stayed in was reflecting a sign of the zodiac for that time of the year. This is the Gypsy Switch, which a number of you have heard about. And I mean, you know, Susie Straw does her wonderful dancing journey round the Gypsy Switch geography every year. And that's a marvellous kind of further expression of this. But the beginning was in the 1980s, an old gypsy in a cafe in Glastonbury shared this little map with Jill Smith, and Jill Smith decided, I'm going to go and make this journey myself. And she did. She went round it in a caravan over about 18 months. She wrote poems, and she did street theatre, and she left a special symbol at each one of these places and sort of brought this energy together. And it reflects a very, very profound kind of energy with below, the recumbent stone circle in the centre, recognised by the gypsies. But it reflects also an extraordinary round of astronomical features in the landscape, which Peter has shared with us. He has his own expression of a sort of national zodiac, which closely links in with this energy that the gypsies were taking hold of. So I just kind of bring that up again. And this is my own map of the Gypsy Switch. You can see how it would make a wonderful tour to take people on, or do a series of workshops around the year, which is one of my ambitions, to have, in fact, a 3-day workshop once a month around the whole switch. And I'm planning to do that with my colleague John Wadsworth later on. And that's something that really excites me. And what really, though, excited me when I started to go into this was I realized that every single one of these places has a local landscape zodiac. Most of them have also been discovered, but some of them are still a bit fragmentary, but they're all actually there. So this is a zodiac of zodiacs. Absolutely kind of extraordinary kind of expression of a landscape in terms of energy. What is it all about? I don't know the answers, I just don't know. But I've been a sort of student, both casual and academic, of this subject for 30 years now, and it continues to fascinate me. But what also fascinated me was that I was aware many, many years ago that sitting in the sky between the constellations of Sagittarius, the arrow of Sagittarius you can see, and which is, for those who are not sure what I'm talking about, is there, and the sting of Scorpion's tail, which is here, those two arrows, those two sigils, the only two sigils in astrology with arrows. Think of your 12 signs of the zodiac, there's only 2 of them have an arrow. And those 2 arrows in adjacent signs, Sagittarius and Scorpio, the 2 arrows do that. One points like that, one points like that to nothing, because there's no stars where they point to. But the ancients must have known something. I'm calling them the ancients. These are my friends. I don't know who they are, but you know. The ancients must have known that there's something there that's very important. And what we know is there, and actually I'm sure they knew was there, is that that is the center of the galaxy. It is, of course, a black hole as well, but they wouldn't have known that it was a black hole astronomically. But it's darkness. These 2 arrows point to darkness, but that is the middle of our galaxy. And as you can see, that is where, at even winter solstice in 2002, the sun is exactly as close as it can ever get to the galactic center. And if you held your finger up, that difference is about as wide as a finger in the sky. So, you know, this is as close as you're getting. This is what is happening after 26,000 years. But that meant that the galactic center was between Sagittarius and Scorpio. And that got me excited because I thought, well, the galactic center must be between Sagittarius and Scorpio in the British zodiac of zodiacs. And where is that? Wow, I realized straight away that was London. And so London was this place which was where the galactic center is. And I realized that the zodiac was Scorpio, and Kingston's zodiac, Mary Kane's zodiac, was Sagittarius, and somewhere in between, well, then I drew a line, and I found that the line more or less was where Hackney Marshes is for the halfway point. And so then I thought, wow. And then, of course, the Olympic bid began, and I realized that if we got the Olympic bid, it was going to be the Olympic Games on the galactic center of the zodiac of zodiacs. And indeed, I'm not going to go into it in more detail, it is, and that's one of the reasons that it's an extraordinary event, amongst other things. Now let's go to Lugh. Lugh is this extraordinary god whom we've forgotten about. This, of course, many of you will recognize, is the so-called Medusa head in the baths at Bath. And then people talk about it being soul, and they don't know what they're talking about. If they really looked at the iconography of this figure really closely, and I have, because my wife Celia carved it over 18 months, and I watch it slowly grow on a beautiful piece of beech about this big, and it now sits in our sitting room, the same head. There were features of it which just told me straight away that this was actually a Romano-British carving of the god Lugh, who the Romans made as close as possible to Mercury. And Mercury, as you know, is the winged god, and also the original tradition of Lugh, he held two serpents. And you can see the two serpents here, one here and one here, and so all the features of this extraordinary god are actually in this Bath symbol. And what's it all about? Well, Lugh is a kind of sky god, and he overcomes, in Ireland the tradition is a kind of monster called Cromdú. Cromdú, and this is a reflection from all over Europe in Iron Age times. Cromdú is the kind of the master, chthonic, monstrous god who holds the secret of the earth, the secret of the harvest, the secret of what it takes to make land grow plants to enable people to be fed. And this harvest revolution, which Nicholas reminded us of yesterday, this great revolution that happened in the Neolithic when we began agriculture. This is a crucial change from the hunter-gatherer time. And this god gets associated with wresting this secret knowledge from this monster, who, as a sky god, he literally tramples on. And this is a wonderful carving from France, where you can see the monster here having to put his hands over his ears as he's being crushed, and Lugh overwhelms him and takes the energy and the knowledge of the harvest. So Lugh is a harvest god. And Lugh gets associated all over Europe with high places. This is, of course, Croagh Patrick, the greatest pilgrimage place in Ireland, and the pilgrimage time is the last Sunday of July, and that is Lunasa. That is the harvest festival, the beginning of the harvest, not the festival for bringing all the corn in, but the beginning of the harvest is called Lunasa, the assembly of Lugh. An assembly is a place where people have gathered, and they gathered at the tops of mountains. And that, of course, had to be Christianized, and the top Saint Patrick had to be brought in to do the job and crush Cromdú, and so now St. Patrick is associated with this sacred place, and he's displaced Lugh. And that's really, that's the myth in a nutshell. The whole myth is in Ireland so much more strongly than here in England, but it's our myth because it's in Gaul, it's all over Europe, and these names of these cities tell us where Lugh was evident. Lugh was all the way from the Ukraine right the way across to Western Ireland, a crucially important god, but because most of the areas of where Lugh was were Romanized by the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire found this god very, very threatening, because this god was a warrior god, a harvest god, a wisdom god, a god of many, many, many talents. They had a terrible time for the Roman god to fit him and kind of displace him. And, you know, our own place names, even possibly the name of London, is possibly related to Lugh. If you reckon that it's something to do with Lud and Lugh are conflated, although there are different images and different myths about them, as I'll show in a moment. They're actually of the same person. And I love Lugh Valum, which is Carlisle, which is, you know, the way that there it is in Carlisle, which is another contender for Camelot, if you're interested in Northern Arthur. And Lugh, what's the name mean? Well, of course, it's easy to say that it relates to lux, and the Indo-European root for a light, or a light one. And there's lots of other ones that are sort of mistranslations, and they all conflate and become part of the kind of myth, like the raven and so on. But probably the most accurate translation is a flash of lightning. A flash of lightning. And I just want to say one other thing. Lugh is not the sun. Lugh is not the sun. Lugh carries solar energy sometimes, but Lugh is much more Mercury than the sun. Lugh is a trickster god who flicks around with infinite knowledge about everything and kind of makes connections. The sun doesn't do that kind of thing. The sun just stays there and glows. Well, the sun is Apollo, like we were talking about yesterday. And often, statues which are presumed to be of Lugh, like this one in Ireland, which is an Iron Age statue, and early Roman times statue, they're often two-faced. Sometimes they're three-faced, because Lugh is a tricky character. He could look in several places at once. He had that kind of wisdom, the wisdom of, you know, North American coyote or the harlequin. It's that kind of energy. And indeed, you know, you think of all the kind of attributes of Mercury himself. Just to remind you again about the festivals of the year and Lunasa, Lammas, August the 1st, the beginning of the harvest, the festival that says, oh, thank goodness we have a harvest. We can live for another year, provided over the next 5 or 6 weeks we can collect it in safety without ruin. So we have a special celebration to say thank you for the harvest, but also it's a prayer. Please give us good weather so that we can get it in before it rots. Otherwise, we can't live for another year. And that's what Lugh is all associated with. Lugh is a provider god. In Ireland, it's really exciting. I don't know whether the Irish do very much about this at the kind of level of thinking of gatekeeper, but in Ireland, the various kingdoms of Ireland, Ulster, Connacht, Munster and Leinster, and then here we've got the Tara sort of High King area here. Each one of these places has an associated Lugh gathering place, festival place for Lunasa, and they make an almost perfect equilateral triangle. And the one down in Munster is at Lugh, a very, very famous, powerful sacred site. And then the one here, which is at Telltown, which is very, very close to Tara, here in Meath. And then finally, the place where Lugh died at Usnach, which some of you will know is the kind of Omphalos centre of Ireland. That's where Lugh finally died in the traditions. Look how Ireland's got it all wrapped up. It's wonderful. And what I think is fascinating about this is, did we here in England, or Great Britain rather than the British Isles, did we have kind of Lugh places linked up in the same kind of way? And I don't know. I'm afraid I just don't know the answer to that. So Lugh is associated with high places. He's multi-faced. He's associated with the sovereignty of the land because he's wrested this secret of agriculture from these monsters, these chthonic kind of creatures that have held it before. The new gods like the Tuatha De Danann in Irish tradition have arrived. He's associated with sacred kingship, and he's associated because his mother, who really said to him, I want you to have games and celebrations to celebrate my death. And these were games and celebrations that were held for the last fortnight of July and the first fortnight of August. These are the Lunasa games all over Ireland. These, of course, have been translated into horse races and horse meetings, and the Irish are so kind of into horses, and it links so much with Lugh energy again. And Augustus Caesar was confronted with Lugh all over um, the European continent. And when he conquered France, Gaul, or took over Gaul and consolidated that kingdom, he set the capital up in Lyon, Lugh, the central focus of the Lugh cult. And he was really worried, Augustus, because they had this vast kind of national gathering every lunar there. And so he took it all over. He said, we'll call them the Augustan Games, named after me. And they went on till 384, being called AD, called the Augustan Games, after being started off in 12 BC. It was just such a confrontation. And Augustus was so worried about this energy that happened around August, he actually went back into Rome, and Rome decreed that he could have a month named after him, because Julius Caesar had already had July, and Julius Caesar had got 31 days, so Augustus said, I'm going to have 31 days, so he took 31 days, because it was only a 30-day month. He took another day from February, which used to have 29 days. So Augustus, the month of August, is all because of this god, and the strength of this god. And that's the altar that Augustus set up in Lyon. And Lugh was made into Mercury, because Mercury carried enough of this energy to sort of satisfy some of the things. But Mercury is not associated with warfare and crushing people and harvest. Yes, the marketplace, merchandising, and you can see the twin serpents here of this Gaulish Mercury. Here is the caduceus, and he's got other symbols, the goat and the tortoise, or the turtle. And this lady he's been given is called Rosmerta, and she's a really rather interesting character, but of course Lugh doesn't have a very strong associated lady. And this is my favourite symbol of Lugh. This is a Mercury found in a field in Wiltshire, an Iron Age figure in the British Museum now, and it's marvellous. He's got a winged helmet. He's very, very British to look at. In one hand, he's got some sort of, I don't know whether it's a plate, or he's just anticipating the Olympic Games, or it's in his hand. I've absolutely no idea. You never know, do you, what they're up to, these gods. And on the other hand, he's holding what the British Museum and all the officials called a rattle. And of course, everybody else knows it's a shamanic rattle. And so you see here Lugh being expressed as a kind of local shamanic god, and that's my favourite symbol. You know, that's the symbol I would say adopt if you want to think of the British Lugh. And he was Christianized. We couldn't have this. We didn't have any hills dedicated to Mercury like there are all over France, but when Christianity came along, these were translated into the best saint that could take this over, and that is St. Michael, the warrior saint, the archangel, leader of the angels, fiery sword, dispensing the dragon, the chthonic energy of Crom-Duw. This is what Michael was doing. And so all over the continent, and here in England as well, high places have churches put on the top dedicated to St. Michael. Glastonbury Tor, Mont Saint-Michel, St. Michael's Mount, Boroughbridge Mount, there's dozens of them all over the country, all the high places. These were Lugh places, Mercury places, and then they were Christianized into St. Michael places, and even the George story carries the same energy of taming this chthonic energy, and lots more as well, but I just bring in St. George as well. He becomes our patron saint, kicks out St. Edmund and St. Cuthbert in the north, the two other kind of saints that were jockeying to be national saints. Richard brings back from the Crusades George, but George, strangely enough, is this kind of Lugh energy again. And here in London, the Lud story, Ludgate, you all know about Ludgate. King Lud, possibly genuinely called Lud, he had a problem in the country. He had 3 plagues. His sovereignty, his authority as king in England was threatened. He had a penetration of a strange group of people called the Corinians. And the Corinians could hear absolutely everything. They could hear your thoughts. They knew exactly what you were doing and thinking. The king was really worried. Court gossip didn't exist. Sometimes these people, these demons called Corinians, got into everything. He couldn't govern. And then on May the 1st every year, very interesting date, sort of Beltane Eve, there was a scream that came from fireplaces and hearths throughout the whole country. It terrified women, it caused them to lose their babies, and their husbands were too terrified to go out and fight in the army, so he didn't have an army, King Lugh. And then finally, when harvest time came, and it stacked all the corn up in barns, some great giant came and stole it all, and so the country was starving. He asked his courtiers, what can we do? And they said, well, we've no idea, we can't deal with this, it's beyond us. You might try and ring up your brother. Now his brother was King Lugh in France. It's a lovely twist to the story. This is a Welsh story, of course. And, and King Lugh rang up his brother and say, hi bro, can you help me out? You're the wisdom guy, help me out. And the first thing is, don't speak on the phone, they can tell what you're saying to me. I'll design a tube under the English Channel between you and me to make sure that they won't be able to tell. So he got this huge tube made, like a sort of, old sort of phone, and they spoke this way. But the demons got in. Lugh said, I've got the answer. Get some wine and pour it down the tube, make them drunk, and so. And then he gave him a sort of recipe, a poisonous recipe for calling a great meeting which all the courtiers would come to, and got rid of them. And then about the scream, he said, don't you realize these are the two dragons of the Saxons and the British fighting in the air above you? All you have to do is to dig a pit, put very alcoholized mead in it, cover it with silk, and they will fall in the middle of the country. Do you know where the middle of the country is? King Lugh? And Lugh said, not really, better find out. So they got the geomancers out, and they found that it was Oxford. So they dug a pit at Oxford. The dragons fell in after they were fighting on May the 1st, got drunk, and they were carted off in a big coffin and buried on Snowdonia. And then the giant, King Lugh said, Lugh said, don't be frightened of the giant, just go in and confront him. So they went into the barns, and there was this big giant chthonic pinching, and they said, right, what are you up to? And the giant sort of said, well, I'm here to nick the harvest like I always do. Not this year, you will serve King Lugh from now onwards. And the old boy said, okay. And he did. And so, you see, King Lugh, down the tube, had got all the sovereignty of King Lugh back, and that's what Lugh's job is. He's into sovereignty, and that's a lovely story about London. And then we get the Lammas tradition. This was the Saxon way of dealing with this, calling it Lammas, the bread mass, and Anglo-Saxon England. And when we have saints associated, and the most famous saint really associated, I think, is St. Anne or St. Anna, the mother of the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ. And we get on St. Anne's Day, which is translated in the new calendar to the 6th of August, we get festivals on Anne's Day. And one of the most famous ones in Wiltshire is the Tan Hill Festival in Pewsey Vale. Something that I and Celia, my wife, have reinstigated because it got forgotten about after the 1930s. This festival from medieval times, a huge horse fair on the highest hill in Wiltshire, overlooking Silbury Hill, mentioned by Nicholas yesterday in one of his maps, Tan Hill or St. Anne's Hill. Thousands of horses, thousands of cattle, gingerbread men, the traditional thing you give to labouring mothers is ginger. This is St. Anne is the patron saint of midwives. The Earth Mother Christianized. An extraordinary kind of energy. And this is a very good example of Lugh energy still in England. And there are other examples as well, when I'm interested in researching these at the moment. But then we get another insight. We go to the famous Michael-Mary line, first shown by John Michel in the 1970s in a view of Atlantis and a new view of Atlantis. And this is the line of Michael and Mary churches, Michael churches, often on the tops of high places, running across the country. And then, as you know, Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst dowsed this line over some years and produced the extraordinary energy lines that flick around all the way from St. Michael's Mount all the way across to the East Anglian Sea, through so many sites. But I think this is not really a Michael-Mary line. This is a Lugh-Brigid line, because Brigid was the famous British Brigantia female saint, goddess that the Romans Romanized as either Minerva or whatever. So if you really want to go back to the British tradition, you've got a line, an alignment here, which is Lugh-Brigid. And everybody, when you read the books about this line, will tell you that it's aligned to the sunrise on the morning of May the 1st. It's the Beltane sunrise. How fascinating. No, it's not. It's the sunrise on August the 1st, which is exactly the same. That's the Lunasa sunrise. This huge line across the country reflects the Lugh energy and the Beltane energy, because the sun's in the same place. But isn't that interesting? And if we kind of go along to this point here, where Luton, the town of Lugh, is, we will find this fascinating place. This is Wallard's Bank. The name of Lugh is still there in the landscape. This is part of Western Luton now. It's all built up. But this extraordinary henge is still sitting there, and that's the Dowsed Michael line going straight through it. It has 5 sacred springs up here, and this is the beginning of the river Lugh, which the Saxons changed to the river Lee. And so the river Lee begins on the Michael line, Lugh's line, here. And as you all know, it then goes across London from Luton, where am I? Here, and then it comes down the Lee Valley to the Olympic site. So we have this Lugh energy coming down to the Olympic site. Not only that, part of the Olympic site is Lammas lands, traditional lands associated with Lugh, Christianized as Lammas. I think it's just mind-blowing, this synchronicity. And people still have the rights to graze their horses on Lammas lands, just literally hundreds of yards from the stadium right now. There's the Olympic Stadium, as it was just a few weeks ago, exactly in the middle of this energy area. And just beyond the Olympic Stadium, going down, as the River Lee slides into the Thames, are 3 incredible tidal mills. These mills were developed a couple of hundred years ago to grind corn using the tidal basins of the River Lugh, the harvest god. That made the area around here the greatest producer of grain for the City of London. This was called literally the breadbasket of London, this part of London. It produced the bread for London, the harvest product. Lugh's energy in the river was grinding the corn for London. I think it's absolutely wonderful, that energy. And that's where the Olympic Games is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And every time you buy an OXO cube, just think Catherine Maltwood's husband, landscape zodiacs. They're absolutely, totally, inexorably connected. Just a way of remembering. You've seen this symbol several times this weekend, yes? The sign of the special crossover points between the ecliptic and the Milky Way, yes? These places. Nicholas was pointing them out yesterday. Well, secretly embedded in the OXO cube is that very symbol, so you never have a need to forget it. Here is a landscape zodiac. This is the famous Glastonbury landscape zodiac. This is a marvellous map we've recently discovered in private hands in Glastonbury, 6 foot by 6 foot, painted by Catherine herself. And you can see the various symbols around there. And I think there's a red mark. Does this is this something that gives, sorry, top right? Oh, wonderful. So you can see all the animals of the zodiacal signs there. Thanks very much. And then later, Mary Kane produced what should be a perfectly round circle, but in fact is turning one of those ellipses that I was telling you about yesterday. But this is in December 2012, where the sun is exactly at the point when it rises on the 21st of December, at the same point as the galactic center. It's as if the sun has returned for the first time in 26,000 years at the midwinter solstice to the place of its origin. In many, many ancient traditions, the place of the sun's origin is the center of the galaxy, which of course it's not at physically, but there's that impression when you stand on planet Earth and watch the stars, and many, many cultures over the years have seen this. So this is a return of the sun to the place of origin. It is a rebirth of the sun, which only occurs at this point every 26,000 years, and many ancient cultures appreciated this and prophesied and anticipated this time as being incredibly special. As we were hearing from Nicholas Mann yesterday and Peter later in the afternoon, there's been this extraordinary kind of awareness of this very special time, and we're all extraordinarily privileged and gifted to be here now as part of it, playing a part. Don't think, though, a gong is going to go off in the heavens on the 21st of December 2012. We're in a process which even the astronomers recognize started in 1989 and goes on through to 2024 or so. 2012 has become the culturally choice date, the date that we've chosen through the Mayan long count. That's the point we've decided on, which is the kind of the midpoint of this huge period of 40 years of changes. And don't say, when are we going to go into them? I think it's pretty evident. Anybody in Ireland who's having trouble getting money out of the hole in the wall knows that we're right there. And, you know, we are in the middle of profound changes. So 2 years ago, we started off with our first conference, and we point up the River Thames and the 2012 date. And then in 2009, we had a further conference examining the same qualities, all the time examining what is special about London, what is it about this incredible city, this sacred land. And we looked at many traditions. I won't go through them all, but if you didn't come to the other conferences, they're lost gems. But some of them we're going to put into a book, a small book, which we're putting together, which will encompass this whole energy and be available for sale before the Olympic visitors come. And now we're into this year, furthering the theme, and we have that wonderful discus thrower, and he's holding the initial logo, which I think is a wonderful kind of... Welcome to our second day of what is, I think, a really wonderful weekend with all kinds of extraordinary new insights and things that we're all finding out about. And this session this morning is really very special because we're coming back to London. We're concentrating really on one theme, that of Lugh, the lost goddess of London. God of London, and the country in general. But I just want to remind you of where we've got to, in a way, a little recapitulation, particularly perhaps for those who haven't been before, to see what the energy and the kind of whole drive of these London conferences leading up to the Olympic year of 2012 really is. What we're doing here is we're recognizing that the calling of the world's family to the Olympic Park in 2012 is no coincidence. It is an extraordinary expression of our land and our national sovereignty, playing host to the global family in a key year when all around the world people will be recognizing the extraordinary energies out of the astronomical alignment which occurs, theme which we've been gifted with. But for me, I have to go back to the beginning, at least of my own kind of awareness of this, which is to just share quickly with you a little bit about landscape zodiacs, because landscape zodiacs play a key part in this whole Olympic geomantic treasure which we have in the country here. This is Catherine Emma Maltwood. She, here in beautiful pre-Raphaelite dress, is the lady who discovered or unfolded or fell upon or intuited the famous Glastonbury zodiac. I just have to point out that we wouldn't have any of this knowledge, at least through Catherine Maltwood's insights, without this. Because she married the man, John Maltwood, who invented the OXO cube. He invented the OXO cube around about 1911 and became the chairman of OXO, and they became millionaires, and through their money they were able to indulge us 100 years later with this wonderful insight. They could hire planes to take photographs of the landscape long before that sort of thing was done. Next year, and we'll probably have a special session in our London conference on it, is the centenary of the OXO cube. And you'll have all kinds of opportunities for buying 3 for the price of 1 in Asda and all that kind of thing.